Hello everybody. Imagine a land at the far eastern edge of the world. A country known for its calmness, order, cold air, and silence, sometimes too silent for the modern human spirit. A place where temple bells ring softly behind the morning fog and trains arrive every second without ever being late. This is Japan, land of robots, sakura, samurai, and cheese. Yes, the land is slowly changing. But not because of cheese. Something is different now in Japan. A foreign whisper has begun to echo amid the bustling streets of Shibuya, in the quiet alleys of Kyoto, even in the remote mountain villages of Hokkaido. Not the whisper of technology, nor propaganda, but a whisper of faith. A soft-tack beer resounding in tiny Tokyo apartments. Ablution water flowing over the hands of a former monk. The voice of a Japanese girl reciting sacred verses as she gazes out her window, waiting for a call to prayer that can't even be heard outside. Something is happening. The Japanese people are beginning to embrace Islam. And their numbers are growing. At first, it was all just seen as a minor statistic. A small group of university students converting after studying abroad. A Japanese woman marrying a man from Turkey. A few migrant workers opening halal restaurants in the heart of the city. But then, strange things began to emerge. A young man suddenly left the nightlife scene and opened a tiny mosque in his garage. A former yakuza walked away from organized crime after reading a translation of the Quran. A philosophy professor quietly started teaching Tawhid in his existentialism lectures. People began to ask, what is it about Islam? What draws the Japanese, a people known for being rational, logical, and reserved, to a religion with no historical roots in their homeland? The answer is not simple. In fact, it's rather unsettling. Because Islam came to Japan not through war, not through politics, and not through passing trends. It arrived silently, piercing through the walls of loneliness and spiritual emptiness that most had never realized they carried. And once it arrived, it could not be driven away. On a cold night in Sapporo, a middle-aged man sat alone in his car. Engine off. Radio off. In his hands was an old book, the Quran in Japanese. He'd been reading it for 2 months. He had no idea who had left it on his office desk. But since then, he had never been the same. Why do I feel at peace? He whispered. In Tokyo, a corporate woman wore a hijab for the first time. She walked briskly toward the train station. Eyes followed her every step. But she wasn't afraid. On the contrary, she felt strong. Stronger than ever before. And in a small village near Hiroshima, an elderly man closed his fish shop earlier than usual. He entered his home, washed his face, and laid out a small prayer rug facing west. No one knew what he whispered as he bowed in prostration. But from that day forward, a smile never left his face. This land of cheese is beginning to change. Not because of invasion. Not because of revolution. But because hearts are beginning to listen. Because the truth has begun to find its way, slowly, quietly, but surely. Tokyo, 3:11 a.m. The sky was still pitch black. The usual hustle and bustle of a city that never sleeps had quieted down, leaving only the hum of air conditioners and the silent flicker of neon lights behind the windows of an 8-story apartment building. Inside a small room, a young man named Kenji woke up, not because of an alarm, but because of a strange dream. A dream that had come back for the 3rd night in a row. It was always the same. He was standing in a vast, silent desert. There, he saw a radiant light, not sunlight, but something much deeper. In the middle of that desert, a voice spoke. Unclear, but strong enough to make his chest tremble. Follow me. He had no idea what it meant. But each time he woke, his heart felt pulled into a kind of emptiness. Empty, but not hollow. Kenji was an engineering student at the University of Tokyo. Smart, disciplined, but filled with questions that logic could never quite answer. He had tried meditation, philosophy, even therapy. But all of it only made his mind heavier. His father was a staunch agnostic. His mother, a former Shinto believer. Both would only say, don't think about things like that. Life is for working. But Kenji's heart wouldn't stay quiet. he felt that something was missing. Something science couldn't define. Something bigger than class schedules, salaries, or status. One day, in the campus library, he found a small book left behind on a back table. An introduction to Islam for Japanese readers, it read. He almost threw it away. But for some reason, he brought it home. And that night, everything changed. He read it. Not all at once. Not understanding everything. But verse by verse, it felt like an answer. Not a sermon. Not a threat. But a guidance he had been searching for all along. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the night and the day, are signs for those of understanding. Quran, Surah Al-Imran, 190. That verse shook him. He began to cry, not knowing why. Kenji was not alone. In Osaka, Rina, a young woman who once worked as a model, found herself growing disillusioned with the glamorous world. Everything felt fake. Forced smiles, a life built for content, and a deep emptiness behind the makeup. Until one night, she had dinner with a friend from Malaysia. A simple halal meal. But what struck her wasn't the taste, it was when her friend prayed before eating, softly, sincerely, with genuine gratitude. It was the first time Rina had seen someone truly speak to God, not to ask for money, not to show off their spirituality. Just to say thank you. That night, Rina went home with a strange feeling. She searched the word Islam online. She read stories of converts. She listened to the call to prayer. And for the first time in her life, she felt comforted, not judged. There are many Japanese like Kenji and Rina, quiet on the outside, restless on the inside. They live in a society that demands perfection. They are trained to be silent. Not to ask. Not to complain. But deep within, they are searching for something. And when the light finally comes, faint, unfamiliar, they cannot ignore it. Islam comes to them not with a shout, but with a whisper. Not with threats, but with calmness. But this search is not easy. There are challenges. Rejections. Intense internal conflict. Many lose their families. Are mocked by friends. Suspected by society. Yet they keep moving forward. Because once the heart has known the truth, there is no going back. They are spiritual wanderers in a land that never truly taught religion. And yet, from that very emptiness, they discover a depth they never imagined. So, what happens after they embrace Islam? Does life become easier? Or even harder? The answer might surprise you even more. Living as a Muslim in Japan is not just about choosing a new faith, it's like walking a tightrope between two very different worlds. For Rina, deciding to wear the hijab in a country that rarely sees one was the bravest act of her life. Since that day, people stared with curiosity and suspicion. Co-workers began to distance themselves. Even her mother said, "You look like a stranger now." Yet beneath those small wounds, she found a strength she had never known. The hijab was no longer just a piece of cloth, it became a shield. She stood under Tokyo's cold sky, but her heart burned warm with conviction. Meanwhile, Kenji faced another test. He had to pray 5 times a day, amid a packed class schedule and a community clueless about Islam. No call to prayer. No mosque. But behind library bookshelves, in an empty emergency stairwell on campus, he bowed quietly. This isn't about the place, he told himself. It's about who I'm turning to. They were not alone. A small Japanese Muslim community began to grow, in tiny apartments, underground halal restaurants, rented community rooms on the city outskirts. There, they learned from each other. Supported each other. And cried together in silent embraces. But danger still lurked. Some were mocked. Some fired. Some even hunted by their own families for betraying Japanese culture. Yet still, they endured. Because even as a minority, even in hiding, they knew one thing. The same Japanese sky also sheltered their prayers. No bombs. No weapons. But the war was real. A war within the heart. A fight against loneliness. A battle to hold on to faith in a world that doesn't understand. For Kenji, praying on campus was no longer safe. Eyes were watching. Whispers spreading. He was called by a professor and asked, "Are you involved with extremist groups?" For Rina, the pressure was subtler, but just as painful. Fashion brands stopped contacting her. She was kicked out of her high school friend group for being strange. Her mother cried quietly every night, fearing her daughter had been brainwashed. Yet they did not give up. Every rejection became a prayer. Every insult became strength. And every tear, fuel to keep moving forward. Small mosques started to fill. Islamic study classes in Japanese grew busy. Even under pressure, the light grew brighter. Islam did not grow in Japan because it was accepted, but because it was silently preserved, quietly fought for. And from this silent struggle was born a strong generation of Japanese Muslims, not many, but truly convinced. A land once silent now begins to pulse with new hope. Japanese Muslims are no longer just a hidden minority in the shadows. They are the new face of Japan, brave enough to stand with faith, carving history in the quiet. Mosques grow fuller, the call to prayer becomes more familiar, and halal food is easier to find. More than that, society is starting to learn acceptance, even appreciation, for a diversity once seen as foreign. This is not just a story of religious change. It is a story about the search for meaning, courage to face pressure, and the unshakable strength of the heart. Through all the challenges, they proved one thing. Islam in Japan is no accident. It is a light born from hearts thirsty for truth. The cheese land is beginning to open up. And their journey has only just begun.